Feel the music. Feel the music.
Why don't you say so?
They watching my moves, yeah, to my dance. I'm a skinny little bitch, still shaking ass. And ain't shit free, niggas show me cash. Fuck a broke boy, I been had a bag. I come in first place, I never been last. A bitch act stupid, bitch get trashed.
This is a story of the time that this girl wanted to fight me in school for no reason. So a little backstory, me and this girl were like really close friends for a few years, and then we started to fall out and then become friends again, and it was really on and off. So she was dating this kid about a year or two before this situation happened. And me and this kid knew each other, but we weren't like friends, we just had mutual friends, so sometimes we would hang out like in a group. During this time, me and the girl were on, so we had plans to hang out the same day. So I was walking to one of my classes when this girl that I barely talked to came up to me and was like, "Oh my God, did you hear, like, this girl wanted to fight you?" And I just laughed because I was like, what? Like, she's my friend. She never said anything to me. Like, we were just talking last night. So I texted her and I said, "So-and-so just told me that you wanted to fight me. What's going on? Like, why would she say that? Did you say anything? Are you mad at me? Blah, blah, blah." And she wasn't answering the phone. And she knew my entire schedule for school because we would meet up during class or whatever, but I'm leaving my lunch period and I turn around and I see her storming through people staring at me dead in the eye. This is part 2 of the girl that tried fighting me in school for no reason. So I'm walking out of my lunch period and I turn around and I see her storming through people just staring at me dead in the eye. And I was like, great, what the fuck now? Like, what now? Because part of the reason why I stopped being friends with her and it was so on and off is because it was always something. It was always drama. It was always arguments, like shit like that. So she finally catches up to me and she's like, "You're a fucking whore." And I was like, "What? Like, why am I a whore?" And she was like, "You're really going around talking to my fucking ex, like trying to date him and shit? Like, you really said that you wanted to hook up with him? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?" And I was like, "Bitch, what the fuck are you talking about? Where are these receipts? Because I never fucking said that." So she pulls up her messages with her and her ex, and she's like, "Look, see? He said it. See? He said it." And he was like, "Yeah, Mia was trying to get with me, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, pfft. All I can remember her saying was, "Bitch, I should fucking slap you right now. I should punch you in the face." And I was like, you know what? If we're really about to play this stupid ass shit, hit me then. Fucking hit me. I was literally tapping my cheek and everything. I was like, hit me then. This is part 3 of a girl trying to fight me in school for no reason. So there I am standing, tapping my face, being like, all right, hit me, please do. And mind you, the entire time, I knew that, like, this whole argument was bullshit and that it was really dumb and that she was going to regret doing this in front of everybody because she had no valid reason to even be getting mad at me in the first place. So I was really, really calm the entire time. I didn't stoop to her level. I didn't start shouting at her. I just stayed calm. So I was like, all right, you really believe your ex-boyfriend over me? Then, you know what? You want to fight? Let's go. Hit me. And it just kept going back and forth of her being like, "Oh, I wish I could hit you." And I'm like, "So do it." And she's like, "Oh my God, I would punch you in the face." And I was like, "So then do it." And then everybody else around us, like all the popular kids that came to watch this so-called fight, started like going to their next class because they were like, "Yeah, she's not doing shit." Then her friend dragged her away from me. And I texted the kid and I was like, "Yo, what the fuck is this shit? Why are you lying?" Then he texted her and was like, "Yo, I was gassing it. That didn't actually happen." But I guess she was so embarrassed of the situation that she still stopped being my friend.
This is why you should be careful working in food delivery. When the pandemic hit, I lost my job and signed up to work for a food delivery app. I was making good money and the tips were nice too. During the first 2 months of working, I never had any weird experiences or customers. For the most part, everything was fine. There were times when I was a little scared of dropping off the food because it was in sketchy neighborhoods or it was dark outside, but nothing ever happened. I started feeling confident in my position and I let my guard down. One night, I got a delivery request and the tip was bigger than the total order. When I looked at the details of how to drop it off, I realized why the tip was so big. The instructions asked if I could open the door and bring it inside of the house as they were bedbound and unable to walk to the door. I knew I shouldn't do it. It was super against company policy, but I had an aunt who was bedbound and it hit a soft spot. When I opened the door of the house, I was hit with the most vile stench that's ever hit my nose. I looked around and called out to the customer. It was silent for a few seconds. Suddenly, someone croaked out, "I'm back here. Come on down." The voice came from a bedroom down the hallway that was pitch black. As I walked towards the room, my stomach was turning. I entered the room and put the order down, but I didn't see anyone. When I turned around to leave, suddenly a man appeared in front of me.
Part 2, I'm sorry for the delay. So I'm still chasing after him, and people at the park are like starting to look at us now because I'm chasing after him and I'm telling him to stop walking. And so he stops, and I tell him again to delete the photo from the deleted album, and he goes, I don't have a deleted album. And I was like, yes, you do. Everybody does. It'll take 10 seconds. And he goes, fine. And he like goes on his phone, does something for a second. He goes, there, it's gone. And I was like, could I see the deleted album just to make sure it's gone? And he goes, no, you can't look at my phone. And I was like, I don't want to look at your phone. I just want to see the album just to make sure the picture is gone. That's it. And he goes, no, you're not going to look at my phone. And I was like, sir, I'm not going to stop and I'm not going to leave until you show me the album. So please just show me the album so we can be done with this. So he shows me the album. The picture was still there. So I made him delete it in front of my eyes. What if I hadn't noticed that he took a picture of my address? And what if I went home that day and, you know, that night when I took my dog out to pee, he was outside waiting for me? I mean...
Story time about how my dad was on the news and now everybody knows my last name. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 6th grade. This all happened on a Tuesday night. So I had school the next day. Well, my dad had went to work earlier in the day. Well, around 10 o'clock at night, we hadn't heard from my dad all day, which was super weird for him because he was always home around 10 o'clock. And even if he wasn't, he still would have kept in contact with us and let us know where he was at. So at this point, my family and I were really scared, and we're thinking that something happened to him. I was calling and texting him, my mom was calling and texting him. My whole family was pretty much trying to get a hold of him. Like, we had called all the hospitals to see if he was there. We called police stations to see if he might have been in jail or if they had his last name in the system. So nobody had heard or seen from him. So we all went to sleep that night hoping that he would show up in the morning. So the next day after I got home from school, my mom came home from work and she had told me about this phone call that she got. Like for part 2. Part 2 of how my dad was on the news and now everybody knows my last name. So like I said, my mom had gotten home from work and she told me about this phone call that she got while she was at work. So apparently one of her coworkers called her and said, hey, I think I saw your husband on the news. So after that, she showed me the news article and I couldn't even believe what I was reading. So I guess my dad had been drinking and he went to an auto repair shop and stole a car because I guess the keys were left in the door of the car. And what makes this even worse, the car that he stole had 2 guns in the trunk. And they weren't 2 pistols, these were 2 big ass guns that were fucking loaded. Oh wait, I forgot something. So before this, he had been at the strip club. And somehow he ended up in pink lingerie. Guys, I cannot make this shit up. So he was driving around and he decided to park right in the middle of an intersection. And it was literally causing a whole fucking scene. There were people with their kids worried as hell. So after that, a few people called the cops, like for part 3. Part 2 about how my dad was on the news and now everybody knows my last name. So like I said, my dad parked in the middle of an intersection and people were calling the cops. So when the police arrived, my dad was half passed out in the car. This happened in like the middle of broad day, like there's traffic everywhere. So when they finally get up to the car, my dad is literally slumped in the driver's seat. There was a bottle of whiskey in the door and it was completely empty. When they went to arrest him, he started resisting. He was screaming a bunch of profanities at them and started kicking them, threatening them with guns, which made the situation worse because my dad had no clue that there were any guns in the back of the car. So that just made the police think that they were his. So they take my dad to jail and he has like 7 charges against him. But we were happy because we knew where he was. Well, the worst part is, so the next day when I went to school, people were coming up to me asking if that was my dad on the news. Some people were even making fun of me because of what he did. And that's really fucking embarrassing for a 12-year-old. But it's okay, Dad, I still love you.
Story time of how I found out that my mom was actually my older sister. My older sister never really liked me as a child. We were never close. I never knew why, but I was guessing it was because of the 10-year age gap. But I'm pretty sure she hated me because she couldn't even look me in the eye. I cannot make this up. She would not look me in the eye. But she never really talked to my parents either. She kind of just kept to herself all the time. Sometimes I have vivid memories of when we were younger and she would always be arguing with my parents about something and I always thought it had something to do with me. Well, I was right. It had everything to do with me because eventually my sister turned 18 and she moved out. For 2 years, I didn't talk to her at all. I honestly don't even think I had her number saved. And I'm pretty sure that she didn't have mine. Well, 2 years later, and I was 10 at the time, she reached out to me via social media. I'm not sure how she found my Instagram name, but it was just my name, so she probably just typed that in and found me. She DM'd me and told me that she wanted to talk about something very important and that she would like to talk over the phone. So we exchanged numbers and we called that same night. And she told me that when she was younger, my dad had taken advantage of her and gotten her pregnant and had me. This is part 2 of how I found out that my mom was actually my older sister. So like I said, my older sister had reached out to me via social media and told me that she was actually my mother. And so after we got off the phone that same night, I lost it at dinner and I went off on my parents and I screamed at them. And I told them that I would go to the police and tell them everything and I would tell them the truth unless they just let me live with my older sister. And they tried to explain themselves, and their reasoning was that they wanted to keep the family together because of their traditional values. And it would have just made their lives a lot harder going through all the court proceedings, so they just kept the family together. And so they clearly didn't want me to go into the police, so they said that I could go live with my older sister. So she came to get me, but she lived in a different state, so it kind of took a while. I still had to stay in the house for like a week or so before she came, but I packed all my stuff and I was ready to go. And when we went back to where she lived, we immediately called the police and told them everything. Fast forward a little bit, they did some DNA testing. My sister's DNA matched as my biological mother's, and then my dad was my biological father, and they saw how the ages just didn't match properly, so they took my father to jail.
Storytime about how I found out my boyfriend's ex-girlfriend was spying on us in the bedroom. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My boyfriend and I have been together for 1 year. Our relationship is really good. We're like best friends and we tell each other everything. He always wants to spend time with me and we're planning on moving in together. Our families love each other and they're looking forward to us getting married someday. I'll call my boyfriend Dan. When Dan and I started dating, he told me that he had a really crazy ex. He was extremely controlling and didn't let him hang out with his friends or even his family. And when he broke up with her, she went nuts. She actually told her family that he was abusive just to get back at him. When we got together, Dan told me that he was scared his ex might try to do something to us. I told him not to worry, that she wouldn't do anything at all. Boy, was I wrong. Dan had his own apartment and I would stay at his place most nights. And of course, we did stuff in his bedroom. One night that we're on his bed doing stuff, I see a little tiny lens on his bookshelf pointing straight to us. I hadn't noticed it before, so I asked him what it was. He said he didn't know, so he went to it and pulled it out. It was a tiny little camera. Part 2 is when my boyfriend and I are doing the dirty on his bed, I notice there's a little lens pointing straight at us. He goes to grab it and we realize it's a little camera. The whole time we've been doing stuff on his bed, it's been recording us. That's when my boyfriend Dan said that it must have been his crazy ex. Let's call her Casey. He had told me that she was really crazy, but I didn't think she was that crazy. Dan starts looking throughout his whole apartment and he finds 2 more little cameras. One in the kitchen and one in the bathroom. As you can imagine, we didn't sleep that entire night. Of course, we went to the police and they opened an investigation, but they said they couldn't find anything. A week later, I get a DM from Casey, his ex-girlfriend. She starts abusing me through DM, calling me a bunch of names. She even said that I stole Dan from her, but I hadn't even met Dan when they broke up. Then she sends me a picture of my house, which means she knows where I live. I go straight to my boyfriend's apartment, and when I open the door, guess who's there? Casey is sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. It gets scarier. My boyfriend's crazy ex is sitting on the couch and I'm terrified. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. She had just finished sending me a bunch of DMs on Instagram totally abusing me. But my boyfriend didn't know this. I walk into the apartment and they're both sitting on the couch. She turns around and asks him, "Is that her?" My boyfriend looks at me with a serious face and says, "Yes, that's her." Then she shows me DMs on Instagram that I had supposedly sent to some guy, and that she passed herself off as this guy to see if I would fall. And the messages were so dirty and disgusting. I tell my boyfriend that's not me and that I would never do that to him. He just stares at me and doesn't say anything. That's when I try to show him all of the DMs that she had just sent me. But I noticed they were all gone. She actually unsent every single DM. Now I had no proof and it was just her word against mine. That's when I accused her of planting the cameras in our bedroom. She actually smiled at me and turned around and told my boyfriend she would never do that. Then my boyfriend's crazy ex slaps me and lunges at me. Of course, I start attacking her right back. My boyfriend separates us finally and asks both of us to leave his apartment. I was so crushed that he didn't believe me. So far, she had spied on us in bed, hacked my Instagram to send DMs to herself to make it look like I was talking to another guy, and threatened me by telling me that she knew where I lived. Oh yeah, and she physically attacked me too. I left my boyfriend's apartment and a few days later he comes looking for me. I explained everything to him and he said he had no choice but to believe me. His ex was too crazy. Then he told me that she went back to his apartment that night and picked his lock. She got naked and crawled into his bed. He woke up, kicked her out, and went straight to get a restraining order. He scanned his apartment for more cameras and found 2 more. What should we do?
Part 2 of why you should be careful working in food delivery. This man was tall, wore glasses, and was balding. He was also fully functional from what I could tell. In this moment, I realized how badly I had messed up. I was cornered away from the doorway. He thanked me for dropping off his order. I politely replied, "You're welcome," and tried to step around him to leave. He took a step in the same direction at the same exact moment and asked me what I was up to for the rest of the night. My heart was pounding out of my chest, but I quickly replied that I had another order to drop off and that they were waiting, so I had to go. However, he didn't move. Somehow, I mustered up enough courage to step towards him and say, "Excuse me, I really have to go." His hand was on the door and I knew he was either going to let me go or shut it and attack me. He stared at me for a moment, then hesitated and stepped out of the way. I quickly slipped past him and made a beeline for the front door. As I twisted the doorknob, I heard his footsteps running towards me. I swiftly opened the door, slammed it behind me, and sprinted towards my car. I felt the adrenaline rushing through my veins. I looked back to see if he was running after me, but he was just standing in the doorway, watching me run away with a smirk on his face. I never should have gone inside for a
Story time. I babysat a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and there was this one night that I was babysitting a 2-year-old. It was around 10 o'clock at night, so the kid was sleeping, and I was just sitting in the living room. In the living room, there was a big TV, a couch, and then behind me, it was a wall with a giant window. So it was really late at night, I had nothing to do, so I was Snapchatting my friends. If you Snapchat anybody, I'm sure you know that sometimes you Snapchat really fast. You don't even know or look at what you're sending. I was mass snapping all my friends, and then one of them replied 10 minutes later. And he said, "Who's that guy behind you?" And I turned around and no one was there, so I'm like, he's playing a joke on me. But then I get another Snapchat from this friend I had, and she lives all the way across the country. They don't know each other. And she said, "I think there's someone outside." So I was really freaked out because I was alone. There was a giant window behind me. Apparently there was someone outside. I wasn't gonna call the child's parents because I didn't want to freak them out, but I was scared. So then I went around the house, locked all of the doors. Sorry, it's a really long story, like for part 2. Part 2. So yeah, there was a guy outside the window. So yes, I did lock all the doors and everything. I made sure everything was secure. I closed the blinds. So for the rest of the night, nothing else really happened other than this really weird thump. It was like someone was knocking on a window. Allow me to demonstrate. I ignored it because I was in denial that this was happening. The rest of the night was normal. The parents came home. I drove really fast home. And then the next morning I wake up. And apparently, an old man with Alzheimer's had escaped from his little home. I did not know this because it was dark outside, and even if I did see him outside the window, I wouldn't have known this. But he was naked. So it wasn't like a mass murderer outside the window, but it was a naked man with Alzheimer's looking at me through a window. It's not every teenage girl's dream, but it's really weird just knowing that a naked old man was staring at me through a window.
When my daughter was born, she had dark skin and looked like her parents could be of African descent. My husband was furious and accused me of cheating and left right then and there. He told everyone on both sides of the family what happened and wanted a divorce. Then his friends and families all called me to say how upset they were and called me really nasty names. My mother was by my side the entire time as I kept professing my innocence. He refused to pick me up from the hospital, threw myself out on the lawn and changed the locks. When my sister called to get the baby stuff, he texted her a picture of a bare nursery room and said he got rid of everything. He even destroyed my art studio. Eventually, he agreed to do a paternity test and he was 100% the father. No one could believe this, so he did it again and he was the dad. One of his cousins did the ancestry thing and found out there was 30% of African in their family. This made Jim's paternal great-grandmother admit to having an affair around the same time Jim's grandfather was born, and because he could pass as hers, she just assumed her husband was the father. Since then, he's been reaching out and everyone has come to apologize. I told him I needed time and he asked to see the baby and I let him, but I'm too afraid to physically hand her to him. I've never cheated and have been 100% innocent all this time. Am I the asshole for not wanting to give him a second chance?
Remember this client who got screwed over by her ex? Well, she came back for an appointment with more stories. After getting somewhat back on her feet, she decided to take a much-needed getaway to visit her best friend up in New York City. She thought she could turn to her friend for guidance and support, but she was wrong. After moving to New York City, her friend changed. She became mentally and emotionally abusive both to herself and others. My client had a rude awakening when she was left outside in a city she didn't know, while her so-called best friend got high on horse tranquilizers with a complete stranger. After all of that, my client stuck around to see if she was okay, just to find her strutting down her rooftop ledge, threatening her life. She was ready to end the friendship, but realized her friend needed more help and support than she ever did.